live this morning, and I've kind of like tried to say, okay, I'm going to do lives Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. And then I pulled in the parking lot this morning, and they were taking out the windows from our office and putting new windows in. And so there was dust and noise and everything. So hopefully now it will be a little bit quieter, and we can actually do some questions. Now, these are just questions from people like you. And so if you have a question, there's a little link right down here at the bottom, PBMD, which is Phil Boucher, MD .co/question, and you just submit your question and then we answer it. And if you have a question and we're live, you can ask it too. But sometimes I have a hard time like seeing all the comments as they come in. I appreciate them and I look back at them, but sometimes I don't get to see them right off the bat. And so we're just going to go through the questions. So recommendations for ear protection for infants for the 4th of July. Perfect question because the 4th of July is coming up. And so for ear protection, I do think it's worthwhile to get some ear protection. I was actually on Amazon this morning. I was thinking, okay, we should get ear protection. It's what, June 29th right now? Are we going to get it in time? And they were delivering on Friday morning, according to Amazon. And I think any of the over-ear, plastic ones that have the little cushions are perfectly fine. Not a big deal which one you choose, really. They're all safe and effective. I saw somewhere somebody was saying that you need like the one that's like the band for young babies because it pushes on their skull. But they don't wear their earmuffs for very long. I mean, if you can even get them on their head for a few minutes or maybe an hour or two, like it doesn't put enough pressure on their head to cause any sort of, skull molding or fontanelle problems or anything like that. So I wouldn't get too worked up about what type, but we do know that intermittent exposure to loud noises can be harmful to hearing, and so it is good to do that. Now, staying far back is good, but sometimes those fireworks, especially if we have older siblings, tend to go off, unexpectedly close to us. And so I do think it's reasonable. And a lot of kids just like to have ear protection on because they're really loud. And, sometimes even going to the movies or something like that, they want those ear protectors on. They can still hear fine. It just muffles the noise a little bit. Totally in favor of that. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your child if they're sensitive to noise like that. It's just that loud noise is like, I mean, our kids, we've had several kids that hate those automatic flushing toilets in the bathroom. And then you're like kind of grossly, holding your hand on it so that like over the little sensor thing so it doesn't go off until they move away, but they're still always loud. And the Dyson vacuum, or not vacuum, the Dyson hand dryer things, like there's a lot of loud noises. So I can understand why kids wouldn't like that, and it protects their hearing. So I'm all in favor of that. If they want to wear them, if they won't wear them, you do what you can, but it certainly isn't a bad idea. Okay, next question. Okay, hi, Dr. B. What allergy medicine do you recommend for kids age 4 and 6? Okay, I like topical medicines for allergies best. Topical medicines would be nose sprays to start with. And so I like nasal steroid sprays like Flonase, Nasacort, any of those sort of topical nasal sprays I like best because it works right at the site. And if they have nasal allergies, it helps to desensitize the nose. It helps to decrease swelling in the nose. It stops nasal itch and it stops swelling and runny nose. And so I just like nasal steroid sprays. They don't make a children's version, but the adult version is fine for kids if you just do one spray on each side. And that's my typical go-to thing for nasal allergies is topical medicine rather than doing a systemic medicine like an oral antihistamine. I like topical nasal steroids best that you just spray in the nose once a day, go on with your business. Those do take a few days to really like start to have an impact. So what you have to do is you have to say, okay, we're going to do this every day for a week and we'll start to see improvement. And then in the meantime, you might do a second generation antihistamine like Zyrtec or Claritin, which will help acutely to decrease those allergy symptoms. And then once they're good, once they've been on the nasal steroid spray for a week, you can usually just take that away and they do great with the nasal steroid spray during allergy season. Okay, next one is hi, Dr. B. Heard about your formula study. What's the scoop? Sorry for the pun. Okay, so we have a formula study going on. It's for fussy babies that are formula fed, and they're exclusively formula fed, fussy babies. We have a special study going on where we provide the formula. My hope with participating in this study is that we're able to help some families out that are in need of formula because it's so hard to come by still. I was just at CVS this morning getting some coffee creamer, and they were completely out. Like it looked just as bad as in the past when things were in their most acute phase and it was on the news a lot. Now it's not on the news, but the shelves are still quite bare. And so my hope is that with this study, we're able to help some families get that formula that they need, especially if their baby is fussy, formula fed. under 3 months of age. That's kind of the cutoff for participation, is under 3 months of age. So if you know somebody, you can have them text the word study to 402-566-5727, and then we'll get them all the information, and we can get them formula within like 2 days notice of them signing up and everything like that. So it's super fast and it helps families. So if you know somebody, let them know. Check out our website, or just text us the word study to 402-566-5727. Okay. My 9-month-old keeps getting ear infections and is a candidate for tubes. Are there side effects from the anesthesia I should worry about? So anytime we're going to do an intervention, there's always side effects, and it's important to weigh the risks and benefits of procedures to make sure that it's worth the risk, because with anything there is a risk. Getting tubes is a risk. Getting anesthesia is a risk. Not getting tubes has its own set of risks, with ear infections or hearing loss or those sorts of things. So typically ear tubes, of all the surgeries that we do on kids, is one of the safest because they use very light anesthesia. And I truly don't think that it's anything to worry about if you're a good candidate for tubes. Now, if it's this time of year, it's summer. Most kids that are going into the summer might not need tubes as much because ideally they get less ear infections because they get less colds. Colds cause ear infections, or colds cause fluid in the ear. Fluid in the ear leads to ear infection, and that's typically how it goes. So if we have fewer colds, we have less nasal congestion, we have less opportunities for fluid in the ear, we have less opportunities for ear infections. So, when you look at how much ear infection surgeries, how many tubes are we putting in, you would expect that in November, December, January, they're doing more tubes than May, June, July. Now, the pandemic has kind of thrown that off and everything like that, but that is overall what you would expect. And oftentimes we look not just at the number of infections, but are they able to clear? And if you look at the newest guidelines from the ENT Society about it, it's most important that they're able to clear that fluid within a few months of the ear infection. So that's something that we can watch, and often we can avoid tubes if we can just be careful about that, ensure that their hearing is okay, and keep watching and moving forward. But overall, of all the procedures where anesthesia involved, ear tubes is very light anesthesia, and I wouldn't have any big concerns from a neurodevelopmental, cardiorespiratory standpoint, anything like that. It's always best to avoid surgery when possible, but sometimes it's not possible or it is indicated. Okay. Similar lines. What do you suggest for cough and congestion relief for kids? Coughing so hard they throw up. For kids, nasal congestion and nasal drip are the main causes of cough. And so handling the nasal congestion and nasal drip is most important. So we're talking babies to big kids. Nasal saline spray works great. It helps to get the gunk out. It also helps to thin it out so that they can either sneeze it out or swallow it or do all those gross noises that they make with their snot. But that is what helps the most. So from babies on up, I think if you can get them to do a good, aggressive nasal saline spray in the nose, and then for babies, you can suck it out yourself using like a nose Frida or there's all sorts of different nasal suction devices these days out there. And so I think that's what works best. In kids over 12 months of age and up, can use honey. And honey works not just as, something that tastes good or, as just kind of like a herbal remedy or something like that. It actually has cough suppressing molecules in it that help to suppress cough and soothe the throat. So we're big on honey at our house, and we're big pushers of honey because it's easy and it tastes good and kids like it, and it tends to get them to stop complaining for a little bit. And so once they're 12 months of age and up, you can do honey. You can do it as often as you need to. We usually just do it on a little spoon. You could also, like if they're due for ibuprofen or Tylenol, put the ibuprofen or Tylenol into a medicine cup, put the honey in, and then pull it all up into a syringe and give it to them all in one nice shot. But that works as well. And then there's really not a lot of other good remedies. Unfortunately, there just aren't that many good medicines out there that help with cough. I think nasal saline is really your go-to for cough. In older kids, you might, like if they're older, if like teenage and up, you could try a DM dextromethorphan containing cough medicine. Sometimes those help a little bit, but it's often just a matter of time. And the other thing that you can do room-wise is humidity. I don't care much if you do a cool mist or a warm mist humidifier. Just humidity in the air helps the same way that nasal saline helps. It keeps things moist and moving and not getting all dry and cracked and gross. Hope that makes sense. Okay, the next question. Now that the COVID vaccines are roll out for littles, What are the latest stats on myocarditis? Is this something I need to worry about for my 4-year-old son? Appreciate your reasoned approach and advice. Okay, so myocarditis, that was something that we worried about a lot in teenagers, especially males, teenage to age 25. They had an increased risk of myocarditis. It was thought that if you space out the doses, that probably helps, but still a concern, and something to kind of give pause about. Fortunately, in younger kids, we haven't seen that in any of the different trials that have been going on in terms of both the Pfizer, which is the lower dose, and the Moderna, which is a little bit higher dose, fewer doses overall, that there's been any cases of myocarditis. Now, what we know about the myocarditis that the teenagers were having was that it was typically short-lived and responded well to ibuprofen, but it's nice to know that there weren't any cases reported despite the trial size, which was, over 12,000 kids between Moderna and Pfizer that were studied. So you can feel safe and confident that, okay, myocarditis is a risk with COVID vaccine, especially in that teenage male age group, but myocarditis is also a risk with COVID infection. And so we know that in the littles age group that there weren't any cases in the study groups. And so you can feel safe and comfortable that that's unlikely or not going to happen to your child with the COVID vaccine. We've been giving COVID vaccines out in our office. We just do Moderna because I think that Moderna is more effective, and it's only 2 doses instead of 3, and you're up to date and protected against Omicron sooner. And so with that being said, we've just seen mostly kids don't have any trouble. I actually gave my kids, my little ones, we had 2 extra doses and we didn't want to waste them, so I took 2 home, gave them to them. No symptoms at all. They were kind of mad at me, but just for a moment, and then they got over it when they got there. It was My Little Pony Band-Aids. That's all it took. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about myocarditis. Kind of rambling now. Okay, my son seems to get overheated easily when he plays outside. Is there a general rule for how long they should be in the heat? How do I know when it's too much? There's not like a general rule. I mean, it depends on so many different factors. The child, the age, the temperature, is it cloudy, is it sunny, the humidity, all of those different things play into it. I guess if you were going to say, well, what would a good rule be? It'd be to make sure that they're well hydrated so that they have easy access to water. It would be to make sure that they have sunblock on and that they're taking breaks when they're in direct sunlight for a period of time just so they can kind of catch their breath. Because it is like if you're hot and you're overheating, then your child probably will too or thereabouts. So I'd say maybe 50 minutes, take a break and, cool off, get in the shade, something like that, and then, reassess and decide if you want to go back out or not. But I think that that's a reasonable rule of thumb when it comes to how much time to be in the sun. Make sure that you're reapplying sunblock every couple hours and make sure they stay hydrated and have easy access to water. But otherwise, I think those things, and people aren't going to be outside if it's 110 degrees and 97% humidity, which is, like July in Nebraska. They won't be outside for that long because you'll feel gross, you'll feel overheating, and you will say, okay, let's go back inside. And so I wouldn't worry about that too much. If you're out on a boat or somewhere where you don't have shade or access, that's a time where you want to make sure they're well hydrated, that they got their sunblock on, and then maybe bringing some sort of shade for them, especially if they're younger. Okay. Hi, Dr. B. Overnight summer camp. What age do you recommend starting, and do you recommend asking for siblings to bunk together, or is it better for them to be independent? Good question. So we love overnight camp. I grew up going to Camp Kataki, which is in between Lincoln and Omaha. My wife grew up going to Camp Foster, which is a Y camp on Lake Okoboji. My wife and I were both camp counselors at Camp Foster and started dating like right before we went there because we both found out we were going to work there, blah, 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 blah. Our kids go to Camp Kataki just up the road because it's really close by and fantastic, and we love it. They start at age 7, and then they go yearly after that. They don't bunk together. It's not even an option because they get bunked based on their age groups, and our kids are all different ages. So I would say there's no reason for them to bunk together. If they're twins, I'd say, apply the same sort of rule that you would to school. Like if you want them together, you could ask for them, or if you specifically want them separate, you could separate them. But I tend to like things, especially when it comes to school with twins or things like that, is just to let the people that are in charge make those decisions rather than trying to micromanage it. If their rule at school is keep twins separated, if their rule at school is keep twins together, then if there's not a big hassle or reason to do otherwise, then I would go with that. Same for camp or something like that. But I think it's a really fun opportunity for families to expose their kids to being away from home and learning all those things. And our kids always come back so excited and matured and more confident and all those things. So I'm a huge camp fan for overnight sleepaway camp for kids that want to. Okay, let's see. Hi, Dr. B. RSV, something to worry about right now. Unfortunately, yes. And actually, I was just looking. I try and kind of clean up beforehand, and I threw this behind me. This is an article from, I think it's from Pediatric News. And it says right here, hopefully you can see this, RSV kills 100,000 children under 5 each year worldwide. And so RSV actually, in the United States, most kids have an outpatient disease. A fair number get admitted to the hospital for RSV, but it's certainly not anything to sneeze at or to not, try and take precautions against, because of the things that kids end up in the hospital for. Pre-COVID, it was RSV under age of 1. That was the number one reason for hospitalization, because they get short of breath, they have difficulty breathing, they need suction, they need oxygen, they need fluids, all of those different things. And so RSV is definitely something that we take seriously. The majority of kids that are breathing nice and easily do fine with it, but it is something to, make sure, if you know that you have a young baby especially, that you're cautious around people that are sick, and washing hands and all those sorts of things to help protect against it. Before COVID, we didn't say like you can't send your child to daycare or you can't do all these things even during RSV season. And so I don't think you need to go that far, but I do think it's something to be cognizant of, and, keeping an eye on your child's breathing if they are sick or have a runny nose. Now, we don't do a lot of RSV tests because we have really easy access to getting our patients back in and following up and all those sorts of things, so that if they start to get worse, we can reevaluate them rather than just saying we have RSV and we're going to tell you to suck their nose out and watch their breathing anyways. But it's certainly something that is worth keeping an eye on. Also, I am participating in a study for RSV. So if you have a baby that's 6 months to 18 months of age and is interested in a vaccine against RSV, if you go to pbmd.co/research, you can fill out a little form and get more information about our RSV study. And that's a cool way to participate in research and hopefully protect your child and other children in the future from RSV. Hi, Dr. B. 3-year-old recently had COVID. How long to wait until getting her COVID vaccine? Good question. So if you recently had COVID, like within 90 days or so, I think that it's reasonable to wait a bit. You can consider COVID, getting the infection, like essentially similar to the first dose of the vaccine. It provides some immunity. Now, there are more, with Omicron and beyond, more opportunities for reinfection shortly after it. We know that in the past, like with the, alpha strain, like the OG COVID, that it was unlikely to get it within 90 days or 180 days even. And it's more frequent that we're seeing repeat infections that are separate infections and not just persistent infections or persistent positivity, repeat infections. But I still think that you can consider that to be the first dose, maybe wait a few months and then get the COVID vaccines thereafter from that. I think that's a very reasonable approach. Oops. Okay. Hi, Dr. B. When and how to stop thumb sucking? Okay, thumb sucking is tricky. We've talked about pacifiers and how I'm kind of a pacifier pusher, not just because, pacifiers help to prevent SIDS, but also because pacifiers are easier to remove than thumbs. And so typically with pacifiers, we say, around 12 months, take it, cut back to sleepy times. Around 18 months to 24 months, get rid of the pacifier altogether. Thumbs, it's not so easy. What I like to do is be pretty non-interventionalist about thumb sucking, because often, thumb sucking is a soothing mechanism, and if you add stress, they'll want to soothe more, which will then lead to more thumb sucking. So what I typically do is just start with noticing times when they are when they are typically going to suck their thumb, but they don't, and just try and encourage that, or affirm that just a little bit. Hey, usually when we're watching Bluey, you're sucking your thumb, but you're getting kind of big now, and you don't suck your thumb as much when we're watching Bluey. Or I noticed when we were going to bed the other night, you were reading a story and you weren't sucking your thumb. That's nice. As we get bigger, we usually don't suck our thumb as much. Gentle approach. I wouldn't get to, the more that you talk about it and don't suck your thumb, hands out, that sort of thing, then they just want to do it more. And so I think just encouraging it by not bringing attention to it when it's happening, or gently reminding them or distracting them from sucking their thumb, and then being affirming and encouraging when they do take time, like when they typically would be sucking their thumb and they're not. So that would be kind of my typical approach for that. Okay, last question that I've got here. Hi, Dr. B. Husband and I don't agree with time in and time out. Okay, so time in and time out. It's probably not that you don't agree with time in and time out. It's probably that you don't agree with time out. Most people agree like time in is a good thing. Connecting with your child, giving them positive attention and encouragement is a good thing, and it helps them to feel connected. It helps them with filling up their bucket, so they're less likely to have their bucket be empty and start to act out to get that bucket filled. Timeout isn't something that I find is very effective for the vast majority of kids, or it's effective for a very short period of time and then it wears off and kids just don't care about timeout anymore. And so my typical approach is to say, okay, if we're tantruming, if we're melting down, if we're throwing the remote because we're upset, start with acknowledging how your child is feeling rather than, oh, we don't do that, go to your room, we don't do that, go sit on the stairs, we don't go that, so go sit go sit over there or something like that. If you instead acknowledge how they're feeling, that is usually the quickest way to make them feel understood and to move on. Instead of, go be over there with your feelings by yourself and deal with it yourself. Well, they're telling you that they need some help because their feelings are too big for themselves right now and they need you to acknowledge them, make them feel understood, and then maybe propose a solution. You can always go back after the fact and say, hey, remember earlier when you got so upset that you threw the remote? Can't throw the remote, can we? No, we could break it. We could break the TV. Then we wouldn't be able to watch Bluey. Like, that would be really bad, wouldn't it? And, it's not nice and it could hit somebody and all those other things. So next time you're upset, what you can do? Maybe you could say, Mom, Dad, I'm upset. I'm having a hard time right now. Or maybe you could have some quiet time or get a book or stomp your feet or something like that. I just don't find that timeout works very well. And so I try and discourage a lot of timeout because it just doesn't seem to work. If it worked, I'd say, okay, use timeout. One of the more significant things that I think parents experience is a difference in the way that they were parented, and that then affects the way that they parent. And so oftentimes it's getting on the same page or being willing to try something different and say, hey, let's try a week with no timeout and see what happens and chart things over the week, because in the heat of the moment it can be hard not to just time out your kid because you just want a break from them. But if you find that, okay, we gave it a week and things were a little bit better than usual, great, we'll keep going. Or we gave it a week and we didn't do timeout and nothing really changed, then at least like you didn't have to do timeout and you still got the same results. Or we gave it a week and timeout was gone and things derailed and got worse. Well, then we probably need to talk to somebody and kind of work on a strategy together. But that is something important, and it's something to talk about when we're not heated in the moment, obviously. Okay, hopefully this has been helpful. I would love to do more of these, but I need questions to do them. So if you can go to pbmd.co/question and ask a question, then I will do another one of these as soon as I get a couple questions and keep answering your questions. Keep up the good work.